From this video, I'm just trying to cover very interesting series or topics related to security and compliance. I've recently completed SC-900. I had a great experience with that. I was preparing for this for SC-900 from last 2 weeks and appeared for the examination, and I could crack the exam with some good marks. It's a 900, so you can expect that good numbers for sure. So what I'm planning with this series, I'm just trying to cover most of the topics which are relevant to the examination. And this examination is fundamentals, and we already know how the fundamentals exam is, where we tend to know the things, rather how things are working, getting into the deep dive. So similarly, in this SC-900, we are not getting into the absolute deep dive or in the portal and doing the things, but we should know the things and how it works, where we need this particular feature or security aspect. So those kind of things, right? For example, if I give you the very simple example, we do have NSG, a little topic in this series as well. So nobody will expect like you go and apply the NSG, you talk about various aspects of the NSG, but you should know what NSG is and where you can apply. You can apply on the subnet, you can apply on the NIC, and what it is for the traffic filtering, and it works on IPs and ports, right? So with this, let's start with the very first topic of SC-900, which is zero trust model. So in order to understand the zero trust model, we need to go years back when the physical boundary of any office is the most secure location. It's supposed to be most secure location, but now people are accessing application from anywhere in the world with any device. You may have your own device, you may have device provided by your organization. It's not limited to the laptop inside the physical boundary, right? So today's organization needs a new security model. It's not only about the physical boundary or the isolated network. So this new security model that I'm talking about should be more effectively adapts to the complexity of the modern environment, because as I said, people are mobile, they are working from anywhere. For example, in this situation of pandemic, however, it is happening from last couple of years, but it expedite or it increased tremendously because of this pandemic. Everybody is working from home, and you have your emails configured on your phone, and your it's maybe your phone, it may be provided by your organization, and you do have your laptop, you see. So now we have to think the security with different perspective, right? So the new security model, zero trust model that we are talking about is just like the name, zero trust. Simply means we don't trust you. Doesn't matter whether you are inside the network or outside the network. We need to verify explicitly. We want you to authenticate, we want you to authorize, we want to encrypt everything. Doesn't matter whether it's outside the network or inside the network. So we are going with this perspective. We are assuming the breach. We are going with the perspective where everything needs to be verify themselves whenever it's needed. Okay, that's why it's zero trust model. So we assume everything is on an open and untrusted network, even if resources behind the firewall of the corporate network. This kind of approach helps to strengthen the security, and physical boundary mindset that we started this conversation is not good for the modern environment. That's why this new approach come into the picture, new methodology come to the picture is zero trust, because people are accessing from various places, various locations with various devices. So we have to authenticate them whenever there is a anomaly, whenever it seems like we have to, so we will. That's what the zero trust model is. So if we have to go with certain example like NSC, so this means that we no longer assume that a password is sufficient to validate a user, but we apply multi-factor authentication to provide additional checks. Instead of granting access to all devices on the corporate network, users are allowed access only to a specific application or data that they need. It is more like if you have your Azure in your environment on subscription, you do not give owners access to everyone, right? You give access as per their role. So this is what we are talking about. This is what the example is. And even Microsoft says if you enable the MFA, multi-factor authentication, 99% of the attacks would be automatically blocked, or you're saved with those uh, attacks. So if I need to define zero trust after this conversation, and before we define it, let's go through some principles of the zero trust model. So there are three principles for the zero trust model. I will do that like three principles for the zero trust model. The very first is verify explicitly, that we keep on talking about. Second is use privileged access. That is about what I said on the subscription. We do not give owner access. We give only what user is needed. For example, if somebody has to work on the backup, we give access to the backup. If somebody has to work on the virtual machine, we give access to the virtual machine administrator. That's it. We do not give more than what they need. That's why it's least privileged access. Okay. And the third third principle is assume breach. Well, why we assume breach? Because so that we can minimize the blast radius. We assume breach all the time. So if breach happens, so we have to come with this mindset. If breach happens, what would be the blast radius? And we have to minimize that blast radius by segmentation. By segmentation, we can have a very simple example like a 3-tier application where we have different tiers, and we take care like it's not talking to this one, this is not talking to that one, so that even if something happens, it will stick to that particular subnet, because it is not talking to any other resources which are in the virtual network, but this subnet is the isolated resource or object in there. So we are minimizing the blast radius. These are the three principles of zero trust methodology. We need to verify explicitly, always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points like user identity, location, device, device health, workload, anything, right? Then least privilege principle, which is limit user access with you can also use there is wonderful feature like just in time in security center, where you only get the access for a particular amount of time for the management ports on the virtual machines, or you can also enable JEA, just enough administration. If you have the license for the Active Directory where we have these features, you can enable those as well for the privileged least privileged access, so that you have the least privileged access, but you have to do some kind of work which require little more access. For example, you need administrative access to do some work, and you only have the VM administration access, something like that. So you can have that access for some particular amount of time that you need to do your work. Then assume breach. We already talked about the minimize blast radius and segment access, verify end-to-end encryption, and use analytics to get visibility, drive threat detection, and improve defenses. Okay, so these are the principles of zero trust. For as of now, I believe we have a pretty good idea what is zero trust uh, security model, why we need it, and how this is helping it, all the three principles. So now we can define it. So let's define the zero trust model. So it would be like, instead of assuming everything behind the corporate firewall is safe, just like in old days, the zero trust model assumes breach, one of the principle, and verifies each request as though it originates from an open network. We put the principles here, right, to define it. So regardless of where the request originates or what resources it access, zero trust teaches us to never trust, always verify. Every access request is fully authenticated, authorized, and encrypted before granting access. And micro-segmentation and least privileged access principle are applied to minimize lateral movement, reducing the blast radius. Rich intelligence and analytics are utilized to detect and respond to anomalies in real time. So this is your zero trust model. These three are the principles. Now, these principles are based on 6 elements, or you can say 6 pillars for zero trust model. And let's go through these one by one. So what are these 6 pillars? These are like identities, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, and network. So these are the 6 pillars, and we need to think these 6 things that I said, and we need to secure those or apply the zero trust mentality on each of these 6 elements. So let's start with identity. So maybe users, services, or devices. These are the identities. When an identity attempt to access a resource, it must be verified with strong authentication and follow least privileged principle. Okay. Then devices. Devices create a large attack surface as data flows from devices to maybe on premises or to the cloud. So monitoring of these devices' health and compliance is very important. We need to keep that in mind. Now, third is the application. And applications are the way data is consumed. Whatever application we are developing or creating, ultimately the users are consuming the data. So this include discovering all the applications that we have in our environment and check whether are we centrally managing those, or do we have the shadow IT. This pillar also include the access and permissions, because these are our applications, how the permissions are managed. So we need to keep this in mind, the application thing. Now, if we talk about data, data should be classified, labeled. You must have seen that whenever you drop the email, some of the email, it is written like classified or maybe private or something like that. Or maybe if you are using your own mobile phone, you cannot copy and paste your company's email while you're trying to reply, right? It's because it is labeled in such a way, like this is not supposed to be read by everyone, this is classified. Those kind of labels here I'm talking about. So security efforts are ultimately about protecting data and ensuring it remains safe when it leaves devices, applications, infrastructure, and networks. That's the organization controls. Ultimately, its center is always the data, and everything is around the data. And this is also applicable in defense in depth, because they are layers, and at the center it's always data. So infrastructure, well, whether on premises or cloud based infrastructure, we have to keep on applying JIT, like just-in-time access, or use the telemetry to detect attacks and anomalies. This allow you to automatically block or flag risky behavior, and take protective actions. And finally, the sixth one is networks. Networks should be segmented, as I was giving the example of the 3D replication, including deeper in network microsegmentation. It will help you reduce the blast radius, and also real-time threat protection, end-to-end encryption monitoring, and analytics should be employed. So these are the six pillars which will help you. You have to think on these six pillars, apply the principles, and you would have your zero trust model or methodology to apply the security in the modern environment. I hope you have a good idea now what the zero trust model is. Well, let's meet in another video. Well, thank you for watching, and you have a good day.